This Spitfire. Britain built this fighter to defend its skies, and it became one of the most recognized aircraft of the entire war. Its elliptical wings were unusual for the time, giving it exceptional speed and maneuverability at high altitudes. During the Battle of Britain in 1940, Spitfires fought alongside Hurricanes to stop German bombing raids from crippling the country. Pilots who flew it often spoke about how responsive it felt, almost like an extension of the body. It went through dozens of versions across the war, each one faster and more capable than the last. The Messerschmitt Bf 109. Germany's primary fighter from the opening days of the war to the very end, the Bf 109 was produced in greater numbers than almost any other aircraft in history. It was lean, fast, and dangerous in the hands of a skilled pilot. Germany used it on every major front, over Poland, France, Britain, North Africa, and the Soviet Union. Some of the highest scoring fighter aces of all time flew this plane. Its narrow landing gear made takeoffs and landings tricky, and many were lost to accidents rather than enemy fire. Despite that flaw, it remained the backbone of the Luftwaffe throughout the entire conflict. The B-17 Flying Fortress. America designed this heavy bomber to fly deep into enemy territory and destroy industrial targets from high altitude. It was large, loud, and carried a crew of 10 men along with thousands of pounds of bombs. The B-17 earned its nickname because it was covered in defensive machine guns, giving it the ability to fight back against attacking fighters. Crews flew missions over Nazi-occupied Europe in tight formations, hoping that combined firepower would keep German interceptors away. The losses were still enormous. Some missions saw dozens of planes shot down in a single day, and yet crews kept flying. The Supermarine Seafire. This was a naval version of the Spitfire, modified to operate from aircraft carriers. The original Spitfire was built for land-based runways, so adopting it to carrier operations required significant changes, folding wingtips, stronger landing gear, and hooks to catch the arresting wires on deck. The Royal Navy needed a fast, capable fighter for fleet defense, and the Seafire filled that role despite being a somewhat awkward fit for carrier life. Its landing speed was higher than ideal, leading to frequent deck accidents. Still, it was one of the fastest carrier fighters the Allies had. The Focke-Wulf Fw 190. When this German fighter appeared over the English Channel in 1941, Allied pilots were caught off guard. It outperformed the Spitfire at low and medium altitudes, and for a period, it gave Germany clear air superiority in that region. Wide landing gear made it more stable on the ground than the Bf 109, and its radial engine proved tough and reliable. Pilots appreciated how forgiving it was to fly. Germany used it both as a fighter and as a ground attack aircraft, and later versions were adopted to carry bombs for tactical strikes. It remained one of the finest piston engine fighters of the entire war.
The Avro Lancaster. Britain's most important heavy bomber, the Lancaster carried more bombs per mission than any other Allied aircraft of its era. It flew primarily at night, when darkness offered some protection from German fighters and anti-aircraft guns. Crews of 7 operated these massive planes over German cities and military targets, often enduring brutal cold at high altitude and constant threat of enemy fire. The Lancaster became famous for several remarkable missions, including the bouncing bomb raids on German dams in 1943. Losses among Lancaster crews were among the highest of any Allied combat role in the entire war. The Mitsubishi Zero. Japan entered the war with an aircraft that shocked its opponents. The Zero was light, long-ranged, and extremely maneuverable, capable of outturning almost anything it faced in the early months of the Pacific conflict. Japanese naval pilots used it to dominate the skies during the attack on Pearl Harbor and across the initial Japanese advance through Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. Its weakness was survivability. To achieve that performance, designers stripped out armor and self-sealing fuel tanks, meaning a Zero hit by enemy fire often caught fire immediately. As the war went on and American aircraft improved, the Zero's limitations became impossible to ignore. The P-51 Mustang. American engineers produced this long-range fighter, and when it was paired with the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the result changed the air war over Europe. Before the Mustang, American bombers flying deep into Germany had no fighter escort that could stay with them the whole way, leaving them vulnerable during the most dangerous portions of missions. The Mustang had the range to fly alongside bombers all the way to Berlin and back. German fighter pilots who had
had once waited for escorts to turn back now found an enemy that followed them home. The Mustang helped establish the air superiority that made the D-Day invasion possible. The Junkers U-87 Stuka. Germany used this dive bomber as a flying weapon of psychological terror as much as a military tool. It was fitted with sirens on its landing gear that produced a screaming wail when it dove, designed specifically to frighten people on the ground. In the early war years, it was devastatingly effective, supporting German ground forces during the rapid advances through Poland and France. When it met serious fighter opposition over Britain, however, its slow speed made it easy prey. Germany shifted it to other fronts where air opposition was lighter, and it continued to serve as a ground attack aircraft on the Eastern Front for years. The de Havilland Mosquito. Britain built this aircraft almost entirely from wood, which seemed like a strange choice during a war full of all-metal machines. Wood was chosen partly because it was easier to produce without straining metal supplies, and partly because skilled furniture and cabinet makers could be brought in to build it. The result was one of the fastest aircraft of the entire war. The Mosquito was used for everything: high-speed bombing, photo reconnaissance, night fighting, and anti-shipping strikes. German pilots found it almost impossible to catch at high altitude. It became one of the most versatile and respected aircraft produced by any nation during the conflict. The Heinkel He-111. Germany's principal medium bomber at the start of the war, the He-111 carried out raids across Poland, France, and Britain. Its distinctive elliptical wings gave it a recognizable silhouette that became associated with the German bombing campaign during the Blitz. It was already showing its age by the time the Battle of Britain began. Its bomb load was modest, and its defensive armament was not enough to protect it from determined fighter attacks. Britain's Spitfires and Hurricanes took a heavy toll. Germany continued using it throughout the war in roles where fighter opposition was lighter, but it never recaptured the impact it had in those first months. The Consolidated B-24 Liberator. Built in greater numbers than any other American aircraft of the war, the B-24 was a heavy bomber that served on every major front the United States was involved in. It had a distinctive twin-tail design and a shoulder-mounted wing that made it look different from the B-17. The B-24 could carry a similar bomb load, but had a longer range, making it especially valuable in the Pacific, where distances were vast. Crews had mixed feelings about it. It was harder to fly and less forgiving of damage than the B-17, but it got the job done across thousands of missions in Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. The Yakovlev Yak-3. The Soviet Union produced this small fighter late in the war, and it quickly became one of the best low-altitude fighters on the Eastern Front. Russian designers focused on making it light and fast below 4,000 meters, where most air combat over the vast Soviet landscape actually took place. German pilots were warned to avoid turning engagements with the Yak-3 at low altitude. Soviet aces flew it with confidence, and even a French volunteer squadron flying for the Soviet Union praised it highly after having experience with Allied aircraft. It represented how far Soviet aviation had advanced from the catastrophic early days of the German invasion. The Hawker Hurricane. While the Spitfire often received more attention, the Hurricane did an equal share of the fighting during the Battle of Britain and actually shot down more German aircraft during that campaign. It was more stable as a gun platform, which made it effective against the bombers it was often directed to intercept. The Hurricane was also easier and faster to repair than the Spitfire, which mattered enormously when Britain was fighting for survival. Beyond Britain, the Hurricane served in North Africa, the Mediterranean, the Soviet Union under Lend-Lease, and Asia. It was a dependable, adaptable aircraft that gave hard service across nearly every theater of the war. The Messerschmitt Me 262. Germany introduced this jet-powered fighter toward the end of the war, and it was unlike anything the Allies had encountered. Powered by turbojet engines instead of a piston and propeller, the Me 262 was dramatically faster than any Allied fighter in the sky. It could have posed a serious threat to Allied bombing campaigns if deployed in large numbers earlier. Political decisions, production problems, and fuel shortages limited how many could actually fly. Allied pilots learned to target Me 262s during takeoff and landing when the jets were most vulnerable. It arrived too late and in too few numbers to change the outcome, but it pointed clearly toward what aviation would look like after the war.